How much did you pay him, Giles? So Giles now works for GCAS, ARM, Adventist Risk Management, and formerly for the South England Conference. Before that, for how many years?
6 years. For
6 years. And I couldn't deter him from the Manchester United slant to his lifestyle, but we can't all. Thank you very much, Giles, for your very busy schedule. He actually looks after. So whereas Graham looks after Europe, western side of Europe, or the whole of Europe?
The whole of Europe he's supposed to look after.
So Giles looks after the whole of Africa.
And Europe.
And Europe, and part of Europe.
Well, I try and help out Europe.
He tries to help out Graham because his dad needs help. Sorry, his dad in the room?
I don't know where he is.
No, he's not in the room. I can say what I want. Okay, thank you very much, Giles.
Thank you. Thanks. Yeah. Good evening, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be here with you this evening, this whole weekend, actually. I just wanted to introduce, obviously Graham already introduced Adventist Risk Management in general. I just wanted to make a point, though, because all we seem to be focusing on, and it does concern me a little bit, when we talk about Adventist Risk Management, there's an automatic reaction of, oh, well, that's the insurance company of the church. You're absolutely right. We do insure the church and we insure the properties and so on and so forth, but there's actually a greater meaning to what we do as well. Obviously, the name of our company is Adventist Risk Management. We don't call ourselves the Adventist Insurance Company. What we actually try and do is we prevent risks from stopping our operations. So what I wanted to just introduce, if I could ask them to just bring up our website, which was recently been redesigned. We actually have a lot of resources on our website that can actually help you as treasurers in your risk management protocols. So things such as, you can see there we have, if you just click on maybe the accident incident report. So these are forms that are pre-prepared for you that you can actually download from the website if you have any issues. So, for instance, if you're going on an outing, we have such claim forms so we can get you risk prepared, so you can go and ask certain questions like, is the car sufficiently in sufficient order? Have you got a person with relevant driving qualifications? That might sound silly being in the UK, but obviously, as I was alluded to, the fact that I work in Africa quite a lot, you'd be surprised they often don't have the qualifications to be driving, but sometimes those things can be overlooked. If we can go back to the initial page, sorry. I just want to show at the top as well, if you could just go to the top, so you'll see under the website, if you go under safety resources, there's all those different areas, so you can get camp safety, church safety, solutions newsletter. That's actually something that's written by various members of our team each week, and it will be talking about various different issues that happen in the church, like how to prevent frozen pipes during the winter and things like that. We've then got the Pathfinder safety, which could be talking about things such as child safety, making sure that we've got our DBS checks in place, and so on and so forth. So I just wanted to make you aware of that. Please do use the website. It's www.adventistrisk.org. Some of the things are quite slanted to America, but since Graham and I have been in the business, we have been trying to make a conscious effort for them in America to be conscious of the fact that we do deal with the whole world. And we are actually in the process of creating portals that will be relevant to the particular setting that we're in. So this is the American portal that's been the first one to be launched, but we will be having a specific portal for Africa. Based on your, when you enter the system, you will say which country you come from and the language that you are engaged with, and then all the resources will be specifically linked to what is relevant for your territory. Okay, if we could just move on to the presentation then. So what I actually wanted to talk to you about tonight, what you'll have heard Graham talking about was something called the General Liability Policy. You'll obviously know a lot about that now. That is effectively the public liability insurance that we call it in the UK, but it's actually far more comprehensive and expansive than the public liability insurance, covering other items that wouldn't usually be covered under a standard public liability policy. So the policies I'm going to be talking to you about are activities accident insurance, volunteer labour policy, and the Pathfinders policy. Now, what you'll actually find with these is they will all going to sound very much the same. They are three separate standalone policies, but the way I want to describe it to you is the general liability policy is something that is owned by the church. It's a fund, as Graham mentioned, it's a fund that is managed by the church. What we then do, this is a very sacred policy, because if you make a claim on the general liability policy, the cost of a claim can severely adversely affect your premium charged. What we try and do is, so if we consider the general liability as, for instance, the castle that we need to protect, we then get these other policies that are basically the fortress walls, and they protect the general liability policy from having adverse consequences to the premium being charged. So the three policies I'm going to go through with you now are going to go through the various coverage that we offer in those. So first of all, we have the activities accident insurance. Now, this is available for all people for whom application is made whilst participating in an approved activity as a group under a supervision of a duly assigned unit leader. So this is effectively available for any members of your church who are going on an off-site activity. So as Graham said, all of these activities are actually covered automatically under your general liability policy. However, if something does go wrong and you have to claim against that policy, again, it will affect your premiums. But this has some benefits to it as well. This includes travel to and from the event, as per the option selected, on a 24-hour basis while the coverage exists. So while the general liability and the property policy is automatically in place, this is a policy that you need to apply for the particular event. And there's a side note that this is not valid in the USA. So what events would you take this particular policy out for? Well, you can have it for youth events when you go off-site. You can have it for church outings. You can take it for camps, group meetings, choir conventions, traveling as an organised church group to a wedding funeral. Just while we're on that, I just thought I'd bring up an incident that we had actually in Kenya. There was a coach load of members going actually, funnily enough, to a funeral. And they actually had a crash on the way. Unfortunately, they didn't have any of this coverage in place. And I think about 4 of the members died. All 52 were the rest of them were all injured, severely injured. But unfortunately, there was nothing we could do. I mean, I get these, what we call Google alerts, and it comes up every time there's something happens. It will come up and alert me that something's happening within the church, and I will then contact my division representative, and I'll say, have we got coverage in place for this? And that was obviously one of the very sad occasions when we couldn't do anything to help. So these are a very useful policy to have in place. So what are the benefits? It covers accidental death and dismemberment, so accidental loss of limb, of sight, or an accidental permanent total disability. And there's various different options you can choose when you get this coverage. So obviously the different options will have different levels of coverage depending on what you require. There's also a medical expense benefit. I mean, within the UK territory, it's probably not that beneficial because of the wonderful benefit we have in the NHS. However, we have to always remember that there is the potential of someone losing an eye or a tooth, and this does have those additional benefits that the NHS wouldn't necessarily cover. So you can see there, you can be covered for up to 8 days for as cheap as 49 cents per person. So obviously that is quite a big benefit when you know that we're going on, say for instance, we go for Chapel Porth. When I was at the SEC and when we used to send our children down to Chapel Porth, I would get all of the children covered under this policy just as a backup in case there was any accidents. We also have, you'll see there that there's no excess under the medical expense benefit, so the deductible is 0. So this gives you a summary of benefits that there is under the policy and the costing for that. And there's something else to be aware of, that the event limit, so any one event, we will only pay up to $250,000 for any one event. So what are the exclusions? The policy does not cover, you'll find that all of these are quite common. It does not cover emotional or psychological trauma, war, riding or driving in any kind of race, criminal acts, and winter sports, those kind of things. How do you apply for it? Well, first of all, you would contact, in the SEC, you'd contact Candy Layson or Pauline Peck. In the north, I believe it's Vawani. Can't say the surname, so... Yeah, so Vawani you'd contact, and they would be able to give you this application form. You would then fill in also what we have on top. So this would give us the information of where they're traveling, how long they're traveling for. Then what we also ask is if you produce for us a spreadsheet with all the names of the individuals that will be travelling, because this is on a named basis, this policy. So it'll be just first name and last name. I mean, the Excel spreadsheet has slightly adjusted recently, but this is generally the basic information we need, just their first name and surname. And then you actually produces individual coverage cards. So you complete the Excel document with the name listed along with completed application form. You would send that to your SEC or NEC representative, and then they will send back to you coverage cards proving that the coverage is in place. We always prefer electronic applications to handwritten. The reason being, obviously, there can be errors in the way we transcribe the names if we can't make out what's been written down. So we would always prefer if you did do it in the form of the Excel document. And full names are required for applications. As you've seen, Graham and Giles Barham, we both have G Barham, so it doesn't really help us if you just put down G Barham, because either one of us could have made the claim and it kind of gives you, there could be a problem when it comes to the claims process. So points to note in claims. So if there is ever an issue, and this is something I should bring back to general liability as well, whenever you have knowledge of the potential of a claim coming forward, it's always best practice to at least let us know. So whether that be you going straight to the SEC or the NEC and letting them know, just make it as a point of contact that we're aware. So I had an issue recently. I'm still, in a voluntary basis, I still work with Newbold School. We had a parent who came and she tripped over and fell, dropped a little child she was holding. And there's potential there that there's going to be a claim being made now. We don't know for sure, but there's a potential. But fortunately, the head teacher came to me immediately. I've now notified the claims counsel, because you have to be aware as well, we do actually have lawyers that work for us in Washington who are aware of the UK law as well. So he's now aware of it. The claim's been opened. It may not need to be used, but he's now at least got the arsenal in place if he needs to start having a discussion about settling that claim. So notice should always be given to the insurance company ASAP. Any fraud, misstatement, or concealment of facts will nullify the policy, and that's true of any policy. Medical expenses must be incidental to incident and must not have a pre-existing condition, been pre-existing, or preconceived. And the claim form should be completed fully and include medical report, invoice, death certificate, or other relevant information in order to process the claim. So that was accident activities insurance. As I said, that is for any member of the church traveling on any particular trip, any particular off-site activity. I'm now moving on to volunteer labour policy. So I want you to compartmentalise what I've just told you about accident activities insurance. That's a particular insurance for, as I say, any person going on an off-site trip. We're now going to be talking about volunteer labour. Volunteer labour policy is automatically in place. The SEC, NEC, and BUC have all subscribed to this coverage. So automatically, much like the GL policy, it's already in place. So it's for the eligible people are any person who's, while participating in any scheduled, sponsored, and supervised activity and travelling to and from such an activity. So these kind of people are people such as yourselves, treasurers who are giving up your time and expertise to work for the church. When you are engaged in these activities, like when you're here this weekend, you are covered under this policy. When we have our cleaners who come and work for the church free of charge, they're covered under the volunteer labour policy. The only requirement is, even when we go abroad, if we take our church groups abroad to go and build a church in Kenya, they are covered when they are under the volunteer labour policy. But the only thing to remember is it's while you're actively engaged in that activity. So it covers all those performing voluntary labour services for a named member institution of the policyholder. So as you say, that would generally be the South England Conference, one of our individual churches, North England Conference, or any of our other institutions under the General Conference, provided such person has been duly authorised by the relevant administrator. So we usually say with things like that, we would usually expect you to have church board approval that this person has been engaged to be a volunteer for the church. So the costs are not something that I suppose you need to be too concerned about, although I believe the SEC did used to charge this down to the various trust funds. But it's generally what we charge is 27 cents per member per year. So for the whole of the SEC, we would do it on a membership basis, and that's how we come up with the premium, and we charge that out to your individual, and then it's appropriated out to the churches. So all volunteers are covered, but benefits available will depend on the age category. So there's three categories. You've got ages of 16 to 65, you've got 66 to 66 to 70, or you've got under 16 and over 70. What are the benefits? You've got accidental medical expense, so it helps pay the cost of treating the accidental injury, including dental, physical therapy, and orthopedic expenses. I'll give an example now. We had an incident in the SEC recently. There was a volunteer who was taking part in fixing some lighting. I believe he was a trained electrician. And while he was up there, he actually fell over, landed on his arm. I think he broke his wrist. So he's actually in the process of making a claim at the moment. I mean, we're still in the process of that one, but I'll give you a little bit more information on that as we go on. So it includes accidental death and dismemberment, includes loss of speech and hearing, loss of limbs and remunerated per schedule of benefits. And there's also medical evacuation and repatriation. So if you are abroad, for instance, if we are working out in Kenya and we have a serious accident and the local hospitals there cannot treat you, this policy will actually be activated and it can pay the costs of your expenses to be flown back to the UK or any relevant nearby country that can deal with the issue that you're having. There's also a benefit of temporary total disability, and this is quite a big benefit, I believe. So if accidental bodily injury occurs during a covered event and a volunteer is put out of work, the following will apply. So you have what we call a one-day waiting period. After the 1 day is over of you not being able to work, you can then receive through the policy either $400, the equivalent of $400, or 80% of your weekly earnings, whichever is lower, I believe. Yes, so whatever is lower. So with specific regard to the gentleman I was just saying, the volunteer who went up the ladder, he is able to now apply for this benefit. He was self-employed, so as I say, we're still going through the process there, so we're not 100% sure where we're at with it, but he is able to claim under that policy. So there's your summary of benefits. As I said, under the different age groups, there is a variation in the benefits allowable. Obviously, I say obviously, but the smallest amount of benefits are those for over 70 and those under 16. I suppose the logic between it is because you're more vulnerable at that age, so there's a higher likelihood of injury. And the greatest benefit is between the ages of 16 to 65, where you actually have accidental medical expenses of $50,000, and same with accidental. So if say for instance we were in Kenya, we were doing a building project, and one of our members accidentally died, there would be $50,000 payable at that, if that was the case. Then we got exclusions, so suicide, self-inflicted injury. You'll find that they're quite common exclusions. Intoxication, funnily enough, occurrence when the insured is incarcerated after conviction, treatment that is educational, experimental, or investigational in nature. So how is the application process done? It's not something you really need to worry about because, as I say, every year we do have this renewed on the 1st of July, and that is automatically done through the SEC, NEC, and BUC. Okay, I'm not going to bother. Oh, there's something that, as I was saying, if sometimes when we do have our trips, when we send our volunteer abroad, I'll come back again if we had this fictional trip to Kenya, we will get out what we call short-term travel insurance, which you're all very aware of, travel insurance. But what sometimes you're able to do is tag on the volunteer labour on top. As I say, because you're already covered through the SEC, you don't need to have that additional coverage, which actually costs a lot more if you take it on a day-by-day basis. So what actually happens is you then have the two policies running concurrently together, and you're able to access both policies at the same time. So if you have death benefit on one policy of $20,000 and $50,000 on the other, you're actually able to claim for both. That's the benefit there. When you're making a claim, you can choose, everything, as I said, is on the website. You can choose the correct claim form from the following link. And then written claims should be given to ARM within 20 days after the occurrence of the commencement of any loss suffered. So for claims involving disability, complete proof of loss must be sent to the division or your ARM representative within 30 days of the commencement of which the liability commences. Subsequent written proof of continuance of such disability must be given to ARM at such intervals that we may require. So for instance, if you are sent off, like with this gentleman, we would need to have regular letters from your physician, doctor, stating that you are still incapable to work in order for the benefit to keep on continuing. As I said, the $400 benefit lasts for a maximum of 52 weeks. So for all claims except that involving disability, complete proof of loss should be provided within 90 days after the date of loss. Again, we do have these day restrictions. What we were saying before was ARM as the way we operate, and we shouldn't, but we do. We always bend the rules for our members. When these things, strictly speaking, those should be the cut-off date. Most insurance policies will say, you haven't reported us within 90 days, that's what it states in the policy, we're not paying out for you. We will always try and bend the rules and work with because we're not actually the insurance carrier of these insurance policies, these particular ones that I'm talking about now. We will try and get them to adhere to what we ask them to do, and they do generally do it for us because we have a very good relationship with them. So evidence may include, when you send in your claim form, you might need to send in medical reports, a death certificate, maybe potentially board minutes proving that you authorised that individual to do that volunteer work for you, and potentially also proof of income, which is quite common that we might ask for. So again, we've now dealt with members who are going off-site. We've dealt with now our volunteers, so our cleaners and our treasurers and our departmental directors. Now we're going to talk about the Pathfinders policy. So as I said, all of our policies, again, because we are our insurance company is made for the church, by the church. All of our policies are specifically tailored to the type of activities that we partake in. So the Pathfinders coverage, again, is another one that covers the general liability policy. It covers all active members, leaders, and committee members of participating organisations, International Pathfinder Club or Youth Club. So when are they covered? It's when any of them are attending any regularly approved unit activity as a group or under the direct supervision of the duly designated leader. The benefits, you'll see they're quite similar to the other ones that we've mentioned. So you've got AD&D, you've got accidental medical expense, emergency medical benefits, and repatriation of remains. So emergency medical evacuation benefit, 100% of the covered expenses if you suffer a medical emergency during your course of your covered trip. The covered expenses must be pre-approved by ARM, but include ambulance travel to the appropriate treatment facility or the doctor specialist travel expenses, such things as. We also, this is quite a big benefit I think that's in this policy. If you are going to travel abroad, we wouldn't say that this is to be a policy that's used instead of travel insurance, but it's something that you use as complementary to your travel insurance. But what this actually gives you as well is you have a concierge service, basically, where you can get medical assistance, advice, and things when you are abroad, and they will be speaking in your local language as well. They've got, about multilingual service centre. So you can get advice on different restrictions in the particular country you're in, and so on and so forth. So some of the benefits, we also have accidental medical expense, and that can cover, if you're abroad, such things as hospital room and board expenses, outpatient surgical room and supply expenses. And then we've got a benefit summary there. So as I say, there's 5 different plans, depending on what kind of coverage you require. Obviously, depending on how much it costs, you get different benefits. But you can actually cover your Pathfinder members from as little as $1 per year. The only thing I'll say with this policy is the policy period does run from the 1st of April each year to the 31st of March every year. If you're going to take out this policy, we don't do it on a prorated basis. So what we do say is if you are going to cover your Pathfinder groups, do it as soon to the 1st of April date as possible, because then you get maximum benefit from the policy. Again, exclusions, suicide, intentional self-inflicted injury, war, intoxication, mental or nervous disorders. And how do you apply? Well, again, we'd contact Pauline Peck, Candy Layson, or Vawani, and we'd fill out one of these forms. They'd provide us one of these forms and an Excel spreadsheet, and you just fill it in accordingly with your individual members group. What you do is, this policy is different to the accidental activities insurance policy, whereby this is done on a numbers basis as opposed to a named basis. So what you'd basically report is the number of members you have in your group, in the Pathfinder group, keeping the names on file locally in your local church and potentially at the conference as well. And you just give the name of that particular Pathfinder group. So, for instance, the Stanborough Park Pathfinder group, you'd say the number of members, and you'd say the level of coverage you require on it. So whether that be whatever coverage level you want. So it's entered on a numbers basis, and the names of members of groups should be held at both local and conference levels, and you can obtain your application forms from the local conferences. If you have access to the travel hub, which none of you probably would, you can download and attach this CSV upload template, which can be filled in. And if there is a need to make a claim, you can obtain your claim form from the same website. So what I always try and do with my presentations is I try and do a question and answer kind of thing at the end. So I'm going to give you a little scenario now, and I'd like to see how much you guys have engaged with it. So we've got Brother Simon is aged 54 and is the treasurer of, I'm going to say, Stanborough Park Church. When he is attempting to deposit the offerings at the bank on the Monday following Saturday's collection, he is robbed on the street and knocked to the floor and breaks his leg. Brother Simon works as a bus driver, and as a result, he has been written off work for the next 3 months, and he is worried about meeting his bills during this period, as well as being able to afford his medical expenses relating to his broken leg. He is also concerned that all the church offering, which was £207.34, has been stolen and is unsure whether it can be reclaimed. So can anyone advise Brother Simon as to whether any of the policies are available to help him with these issues? Okay, so can anyone recommend one of the policies? We've talked about 3, and there's even potentially of the 2 that Graham mentioned. Can anyone think of any policies here that can help him? So we say volunteer? Volunteer labour? Okay. How will the volunteer labour policy help him? Medical expenses potentially, yeah. What else could he potentially... What about... Sorry, with his work? Yeah, okay, so lost income. That's a good one. Does anyone remember what he might be paid from the lost income through the policy? $400 or? 80%, whichever is... Well done. And how about the church offerings? Is that covered? Yes. Under which policy? I'm hearing all kinds of things at the moment. Which one? Church property. Who said that? Church property insurance. That's the one, yes. So no, not general liability, because even though it's the property, it's actually the property of the church. But you're correct, it's under the liability of under the property policy, under the money cover. So I always give, as I say, I name them possible answers, because obviously I'm sure the other things that you've brought up quite possibly are correct. But the volunteer labour policy can respond to help him with his medical expenses and his worries about his bills. After a waiting period of 1 day, he can start to receive up to $400 per week for the remaining 3 months he has been signed off work. He will be assisted with up to $50,000 of medical expenses, which will be related to his broken leg, or the schedule value as stated in the policy particulars. And if the church had property insurance on the church, money cover is in place and the church will be indemnified for the loss. Can anyone remember what the property policy deductible is, or excess in English? In the UK, what's 3,000? You're right, £3,000 is the minimum level of money cover, but what is the excess on our policies in the UK? £500, yeah. So actually, in this case, he wouldn't actually probably receive any money back on that loss because there is the £500 policy deductible. But generally speaking, we do have that policy in place. Okay, question 2. Sister Martins has come to you asking for some advice. She is looking to set up a Pathfinder club in her local church and wants to know if the group will be covered when they are having their weekly meetings, if she takes out the Pathfinders International Insurance Policy. She tells you that her friend, Ruth, who runs a neighbouring church Pathfinder group, has taken some children over to France for a camping trip, and one of the children got sick over there and has been vomiting violently which she suspects was from some of the food they ate. There has been a rumour that the children had sneaked away to the shop to buy alcohol and this may have been the reason why the child was sick. So advise Sister Martins whether the weekly meetings are covered under the Pathfinder policy. So would they be covered? What does the policy state about it? What is the requirement? That's right, but yeah, we'll get to that question. So it basically says, the policy says when they're under the duly assigned, under a designated leader, but a duly any event that is authorized by the Pathfinder group, basically, that when they've got a duly designated leader. So that's right, yes, that would be covered. So explain to Sister Martins how she can advise Ruth as to what can be done for the sickly child utilizing the Pathfinder's policy. What benefits are in the Pathfinder policy that they could use to get some help while they're abroad in France? Potentially, yeah, the ambulance. There was one very specific thing that they... Great, yes. So there's the concierge service. So they could call up the local and find out what might be necessary to be done. I suppose it's kind of like NHS direct service. So there's that benefit, yeah. Okay, and what would be the result if it was found that the child's sickness stemmed from alcohol intake? Exclusion under the policy. Yeah, that's right. So yes, weekly events are covered. They meet the criteria of attending any regularly approved unit activity as a group or under direct supervision of the duly designated leader. It would be worth telling Ruth to utilize the travel assistance services initially in trying to establish how to make the child's condition stable. If the situation required hospitalization or a doctor's visit, the child's costs incurred for treatment would be covered and further could cover the cost of the doctor's travel or ambulance trip to the hospital. And if it was found that the child's illness stemmed from the consumption of the alcohol, the policy would not cover the event and the costs would end up being the child's family's liability. Intoxication is an exclusion on the policy. Okay, finally, we've got a youth group is going away for 7 days to a campsite in Aberdaron, and this has been authorized by the church board. Sister Ampofo is the leader of the group and wants to be sure that they have an insurance policy in place to cover the church if any of the youth group gets sick, die, or lose a tooth. Advise Sister Ampofo of an appropriate policy so that she can take out the cover that she needs. Activities accidents insurance. Yep, that's great. So Sister Ampofo could take out the miscellaneous activities insurance, activities accident insurance. This provides AD&D coverage, accidental medical expense, remedies for accidental dental, dread disease, and other sickness, and could be covered for as little as 49 cents per individual for 1 to 8 days. So if you have any questions regarding any of the policies now, I'm open to that. Yep.
Sorry, did I miss where it says what the cost is for the Pathfinder insurance?
It was on there, yeah. It was one of the summaries. I don't know what slide it was now, but
Could you repeat the question?
there is a schedule of costs on one of the slides. Yeah, but it does. It's from as low as $1 per year per member. That's the cost. Yep. Question at the back.
Sorry.
Pathfinders. So if we have our yearly activities for Pathfinders, so on first Sabbath we are going to members' house in the minibus to visit the shut-ins. We are going, taking the children bowling. We are going camping 2 or 3 times a year. Are we saying for each of those activities, we are going Remembrance Day, drumming on the road, etc. Are we saying that for each of those activities, they need to be registered individually?
Not for the Pathfinders coverage. That's what I'm saying. That's a very specific policy. That's $1 per year from the policy period of 1st of April to the 31st of March the following year. And that covers all activities that you go on.
Well, I do know
on a
that.
numbers basis.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. Question at the back? Yes?
We have a luncheon club in our church.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we're trying to say to folks who are coming from outside the church who are wanting to help.
Yep. They are covered also under the volunteer labour policy. Even though we base the premium on a members basis, any person who is working as a volunteer for your particular church that's been approved by your church board is covered under the volunteer labour policy.
Why am I right in understanding that you're saying that war, what you
I don't know if they take specific insurance for those particular activities. Under this particular policy, it's not covered, but I'm sure that we wouldn't send them out vulnerable. They would have a different type of policy in place for ADRA volunteers, which is actually there is another kind of volunteer policy that isn't related. What I'm showing you today is very specific policies that are for our members, that is relevant to you as treasurers. So the people who are sent as volunteers would usually be voted through the conference board or GC, and they would go through a separate policy. Yep.
So you're always mentioning about church board. If, as the gentleman just gave an example, you have someone else that is not member of our church is doing a voluntary job, a voluntary work, but you always mention about board, so it has to be pre-approved, otherwise it's not being covered.
It has to be approved by your church board. The reason why we say that is because the sum of many is better than the sum of one. At least then you have your background information, you've got your approval from your consensus, the appropriate board, and then they are covered. Yes, it's the same with general liability. I mean, generally speaking, we say all activities are covered, but they should be approved by your church board.
I just wanted to respond on the question that my brother asked. I'll give an example of Pathfinders. For example, if we are going to do a first aid course, we are going to invite somebody from St. John's. We usually seek approval from the board, write letters that evidence that we are having an external person coming. So those letters that we have automatically would save us in terms of anything.
Yeah, that's good.
If community services wanted to take out individuals from the community on a day trip, what insurance is there for them?
So if you're saying on a one-off basis,
Yeah.
so that activity is accident insurance, remember what we said, on a named basis? We can cover those individuals who are outside of the church. Because remember, we're also dealing with the church's reputational risk. So when we are taking people who aren't, it's perfectly fine to have non-members, because those non-members can eventually become members. That's the bottom line. What we want to do is protect the church's name, protect our reputation, and that's perfectly fine if the church approves of it. I had a question down here.
Go ahead.
Just on a more sort of like spur of the moment sort of thing, I'm the children's Sabbath school
Sure.
leader, so on like a nice day if we wanted to go collect autumn leaves or something, I wanted to take a string of kids.
Yes.
So that's obviously not something we're going to afford approval for.
No. Yep. That's fine.
Is there anything that would cover that?
Well, as we said, general liability is already in place. You don't need to worry. That's there. I mean, but one other benefit that I should say about Adventist risk management is, as soon as you send an email, whether we are in the office or not, if you hit an email that hits my email address, anyone in my office, if it hits our email address, you are covered from the second it hits our email. So if you send us an email and say you've bought a property on Friday afternoon just before Sabbath, you send it at 4 o'clock, there's no one in the office, the completion goes through, it burns down at 7 o'clock that night, it would be covered because we have that email. That is, the coverage starts from the second you send that email and it's hit our email box. So you can be assured through that knowledge, yeah. They're exactly the same as Pathfinders. So they would be covered under the Pathfinders policy. Also, youth clubs can also be. I think the youth club premium is slightly more expensive. But you'll see all three of the coverage that I've just gone through have got similar kinds of coverage, but it's just for the personnel that they're covering. It's different for the needs of those individuals.
Yeah, just to aside, do we have any policy for children in the church? Children's department.
Children in what respect?
Department.
Children's department.
Yes.
Well, I would.
Not Pathfinders. You got a children. You got children department. Then we have Pathfinders.
I would argue all of our policies are for children and everyone.
And everyone.
So the general liability automatically covers the child, because even as a member, you're a third party. If a child is in our church, they're highly vulnerable. As we know, we need to take extra precautions. If something happens to that child, the general liability policy would respond automatically.
So the policy, if you are doing it for Pathfinders, covers all the children, or you do separate for the children?
If you remember what I said, the general liability is there regardless. All we recommend is you take out these policies to safeguard the general liability policy, because the general liability policy can be very expensive if you have lots of claims going against it. If these policies are there in place to protect that policy, there's less likelihood that people, once they've activated one of these policies and made a claim on it, would also want to make a claim under the general liability. Does that make sense? Yeah? So all the policies do cover all of our members. All of you as members, you're also covered under general liability. But also, when you're actively engaged as a volunteer, you're actively covered under the volunteer labour as well. But automatically, when you're in our churches, you're covered under general liability as well. Because as soon as it's an owned property, you're covered. As Graham mentioned, in an event like this, you're covered as well, because this is a church-approved activity that you're engaged in. Does that make it a little bit more clear? Okay? I think that should be all then. Thank you very much. Thank you.